Welcome back to BYOD. The next 4 episodes will be at the Sundance Film Festival, which was a really wonderful week in Park City, talking to most of the documentary filmmakers at Sundance this year, in the premiere section and in competition. In general, we just had a smooth and wonderful time, except for my co-host got very confused.
Very confused.
Check this out.
Hey, Noni de la Pena. Hey, you made Hunger in LA. I'm supposed to interview you.
Oh, no, sorry, my name's Nicole. I think you got the wrong person.
We got Noni inside. We're supposed to be shooting BYOD.
Oh my God, Nicole. Nice to meet you. So sorry.
Sorry, Nicole. Come here, let's intro the show. Welcome to BYOD, Sundance Edition. This is my very confused co-host, Vladimir Radovanov.
How y'all doing?
Intro me, babe.
Andi Tmoner.
Okay, we're at New Frontiers, the site of fantastic art and video installations. We'll be talking to a couple artists from this exhibit as well. And let's go inside. Noni's waiting.
All right, let's interview some documentary filmmakers.
Everything came to a complete change the day that I was raped.
I got there in February. By April, I was drugged and raped for the first time.
I had like a cold or pneumonia-like symptoms, and so they sent me to get checked out. And while I was waiting to be examined, he came in and he helped himself.
He said he was going to the bathroom, and he came into my room, and that's when he raped me.
The entire time I was screaming and yelling for help and for him to stop. Nobody came to the door, nobody came to help me, came to my rescue or anything.
They made it very, very clear that if I said anything, they were going to kill me. You know, and then of course I didn't have anyone to go talk to because the people that were perpetrating me were the police.
It was my first time ever, and I've had a tough time convincing myself that I'm still a virgin.
If this is happening to me, you know, surely I'm not the only one, in which I found out later, going through the claims process, that I wasn't.
So we are here with Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering, writer-director of The Invisible War, and also a producer and a film by both of you. So, and you hear Amy's voice behind the camera quite a bit, and given that rape is a big topic in the film, and really what the film's about, and most of the subjects that were raped were women, I'm sure it was very important to the process that there was a woman on board.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, Amy did the interviews with the survivors, and I mean, I think she did an incredible job. I mean, they're so powerful. You know, I think there was a certain, you know, she had this incredible empathy with them, because we go into these houses, and we did this cross-country trip where we started in New York and we drove across country to meet about 20 or 25 of these people, and I was shooting these pre-interviews. And you know, we'd go in, and in 15 minutes, they're just breaking down, telling us a story that they may have only told to 1 or 2 people in their life, or even never told. And so Amy was just masterful at just sort of getting them to feel comfortable, and yet at the same time getting them to move forward and tell their story.
Given the severity of the topic, how did you get your survivors? I mean, how did you find them, and why were they so willing to talk about it?
Well, it took some time, actually. I mean, almost all of the survivors have PTSD. Almost all of them are agoraphobic. They're very ashamed. They're very depressed, and And so they're really in pockets of this country, just kind of, they're forgotten really. And so what we did is we reached out through Facebook, to victims advocates, to small journalists. We just put the word out, over several months, and then finally, they started coming forward. We were at first we weren't even sure how many we would get. We thought maybe we'd get 2 or 3, but in the end, I think we contacted over 120.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful film. You have to see The Invisible War, which I assume you're figuring out how we're all going to see The Invisible War. That's why one of the reasons that it's great that you're at Sundance right now. Do we know yet how it's going to be coming out?
Well, ITVS came in, so it'll be on PBS, and we're talking to a lot of distributors right now. So possible theatrical. It will. Obviously, it'll get out on all the digital platforms, and then there's also going to be an extensive sort of outreach campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say that it's a huge advocacy film. It's extremely emotional, and it's extremely hard-hitting and revelatory, and there's a lot of things that we can't even get into here that are just mind-blowing, that you will not believe. So you're watching some images and you're hearing words that collide with your understanding of what you thought the American military was about, what it's like to be a soldier and to serve your country, and how has the reaction been so far to that?
It's been really, really amazing. We were just completely thrilled. The first screening, everybody stood up and applauded, and I just started crying because I said, "Oh, yeah, it was so powerful." And I was like, "Oh my God, we did it! We actually did it. Other people are responding to this, and they get it." And it's kind of overwhelming. It's very.
You were editing like 2 days ago.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure what we were going to be putting out there. So yeah, no, we're grateful and humbled and. Excited because unlike other social ills we've been saying, this actually could be changed. The military is so hierarchical that if they want to change something, and there's such an enclosed environment, so unlike other social ills where it just seems so complex, if the order comes from the top down to not tolerate this kind of behavior and to actually prosecute criminals, game over.
So you just need to get to the President of the United States,
exactly,
which
and
you
the
probably
Joint Chiefs
will
of Staff.
do. So step 1 is dismantling the structure of the fact that the military has its own justice system, right? That's step 1, is you get a judge from outside.
Have some non-biased oversight, at least, to the system, which does not currently exist.
Okay, because there are 20% of women, and there's a new figure that it's 30%, Nicole told me last night, is that right? 30% of women in the military
more
are
than
raped?
20% of women who've been in the military have been raped. It could definitely be higher. More than 30% of women, there were several studies done a while ago that more than 30% of the women involved with the VA had been raped or sexually assaulted.
The problem with all these statistics is they're intentionally obfuscated and buried. Right. So we get really hard hit with tell us what the exact statistics are. And as we show even a little part in the film, it's arcane and complex and you can't even really follow it. And plus they always release the only reports they give out between Christmas and New Year, so that report on sexual assaults is also buried. So it's quite complicated. But we do think, having crunched all the data, that it would be safe to say between 20 and 30% is a safe figure.
Yeah, and not just women.
Not just women.
One thing I really enjoyed about your film was, you touched on the risk that is present in the military, the harm, the denial, and then the treatment. And just the terrible treatment by the military.
She's like, I don't have discs in my face.
And just the over-prescribing of medicine.
Yeah, this is something we encountered with everyone. I mean, what you see in the film with Corey showing her meds is with everyone. I mean, it was always just a complete medicine cabinet of meds, and they were all around the house, and it was astonishing. Amy, yours?
Yeah, it's zombie nation. I mean, after the 70th woman I would talk to who I could tell was clearly on something when I was doing these intakes to just find our subjects, it was staggering. The VA is too overwhelmed. We've got too many people now needing help, and we don't have the facilities to treat them. So the only solution they have is to sort of write these prescriptions. It's not that they're evil. They just don't know what else to do.
Just trying to sedate them.
Right, and undereducated. And then these women are so traumatized that they don't know how to ask for help otherwise.
They don't have North anyway.
Exactly.
And they don't know what to feel normal anymore. Right?
And a light bulb really went off in one survivor's house when I said to her, okay, so you've been on all these meds for 3 years. What are you and your therapist working towards? When are you going to get off them? And she looked at me and she said, that never occurred to me.
Right.
She thought this is her life, and there's like 6 a day, 3 times a day.
That's right. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is seeing her, and we kind of talked about her medicine cabinet, but seeing her on the phone trying to get the VA to answer.
Being stonewalled, basically.
Yeah, and just put on hold, and then finally she gets the thing in the mail, and I was wondering how you knew that she was, but I guess you knew somehow, or you were living with.
We asked her when she saw it in the mailbox to call us, and then we would send a camera over. Camera person, you know, and not open it, just wait. Okay, it's there, and then he'll come over. She knew around the rough month that it was going to happen.
Very good, and then she's denied coverage, even though there's
which we were
X-rays.
shocked.
Right.
I mean, that was shocking for all of us, and you see that on camera, and it's like.
It's an amazing scene.
Yeah.
And
After
so
5
then the
years.
movie shows here what happens.
Well, as I said, we were stunned by the response, and people stood up and were applauding and crying. And one of the ushers said that in all their years of working at Sundance, they've never seen people leave the theater so shell-shocked. So I go stumbling out to the lobby, and this man comes up to me and says, and holds my hand and says, "You tell that young lady that her face is going to be taken care of." And I said, "I'm sorry." He says, "Whatever she needs, we'll pay for the surgery." Wow. And then I said, "Can I bring her over?" He goes, "I want to remain anonymous." But Corey was standing right by me,
chills.
and I couldn't help it, so I brought her over, and I said, "He has something to say to you." And she also didn't get it at first, and then she started shaking and crying. I mean, it was pretty.
Wow.
I mean, when does that ever happen? He was so moved, and
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, we felt like we did. I mean, if nothing else happens, like.
What are the ways in which this is more drastic for people in the military to be raped than it is for outside? So it's not only that it's their brothers and brothers one day turning evil, right? But there's more.
It's perfect storm conditions for magnifying the trauma exponentially, because these women are assaulted, and they've also been, as you said, psychologically stripped down to believe that this is their family. They go to report, right, expecting this will be received well, you know, and taken care of, and then it's not. So something doesn't compute. This is their family. Now they're not trusted, and they're accused, and they're themselves victimized, and
then they get the report. Then they're being reported, right?
Right, and then it's turned on them. So it's inconceivable psychologically, and then they don't understand. You know, it's a whole host of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, because they, you know, even after they're raped, and they're told, don't report because it'll be the end of your career. They believe so much in the system that they say, of course I'm going to report, and the military is going to do the right thing. And then when it turns on them, like we spoke to 3 women personally who were single, raped by a married man, and the woman got charged with adultery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, we saw that in the film.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Or don't wear makeup, because then they'll think you want it.
Yes.
Right.
It's like, wow, really?
Yeah.
2012?
Yeah.
How did you guys come across this? How did this what was the genesis of this film? Kirby, you just churn them out. Where does this fit in your This is Kirby Dick, everybody. Oh, my fellow panelist from last month.
That's true.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was fun. That was good.
We read an article in Salon like 4 years ago, was it 4? And we were both shocked by it and talked about it, and we just said we got to make a movie.
And you guys have been friends and collaborators
Ever
for a long
since
time.
Sick. I saw a rough cut of Sick, and we started working on. Then we worked on Derrida after that.
Yeah, that's great, actually. No, it is. Lit 300, man. I was there. You have to go. Actually, it's required. So Sundance for you, this is Sundance number, you're the Special Jury Prize winner
Yes.
of the past, right?
This is the 6th film I've had in Sundance.
How's the experience been so far this year?
Well, it's great. I mean, it seems like it's, you know, great every time you come. I mean, you know, there's this added element because this will have such a political and hopefully will cause change. So, you know, we're sort of waiting for the kind of response from the Department of Defense, whether they'll say, okay, you know, finally it's so in our face, maybe we will try to do something about it, or they will start spinning the problem like they've done, you know, with the Air Force Academy, with Tailhook, etc.
And the way the spokespersons
But you'll be there,
in the film did,
Yes.
actually.
You won't let them do that, right? You're going
No.
to stay on top of it.
We absolutely are going to stay on top of it.
love that.
We're with this thing for the long haul.
Good.
That's so great. We're meeting so many filmmakers today that that have that same spirit, that they realize and they recognize, and I think it's generally the ones who have been through this, you know, like the Eugene Jareckis, et cetera, that it's like a film that is going to require, you realize you're just releasing the child into the world here at Sundance, and now you've got to raise your child.
Right.
You got to make your child sing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a big wake-up call, I think, for people who will see this movie just like the Jarecki film. I mean, you just don't know that this is happening. It's kind of under the radar. It's never reported. It's never talked about. I never knew this was such a huge problem, and I watched your film.
But you can't look at the military the same anymore.
No, you can't.
You know, and I mean, it's amazing when you see. Is it Corey?
Yes.
Corey trying to talk the woman at the restaurant.
Trying to talk her out of going to the military.
Yes.
Please
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was such a spontaneous scene because. You know, we were all three eating there. Of course, Corey, she can only eat what she ordered. She's eating mashed potatoes. That's all she can eat. You know, and she
because she was hit so hard,
yes.
everybody, that she lost the discs in her face.
Yeah.
Right.
Push forward, and so you know, we looked over there, and I mean, she heard this happening. She's, you know, and she said, I feel like I should go over and talk to her. So we didn't have our camera out. We pulled it out. So we're shooting in the restaurant, right, without any, you know, how do you hold
No
a
permission,
camera?
right?
No permission. You know, people in the foreground, so you don't, you know, it was a little, you know, rocky.
That's actually
but it
something
kind of
that
adds to it.
We
You
would
know.
have talked about on our panel.
Yes.
So where can we find you online?
Oh, online, we're at www.invisiblewarmovie.com. You can also follow us on Twitter.
Okay.
Not Invisible is a hashtag Not Invisible. Can you tell that one?
No, it'd just be at not invisible. But I'll tweet about it after this.
Hashtag Not Invisible. And also follow us on Facebook. Invisible War Movies on Facebook. And should we talk about Mary J. Blige since we're here?
Let's talk about Mary J. Blige.
The other exciting and remarkable and like wonderful thing about it is we got a rough cut. One of our executive producers, I just put out the call. I said, anyone know anybody who might want to have an end credit song, thinking we get like their neighbor, and you know,
Hoping we get their neighbor.
Exactly. And of course, because we have this dream team of E-pros, you know, one writes back and goes, well, I know Mary J. You know, would you mind sending her a rough cut? And we sent her a rough cut, and she called and said, I'll do the end credit song. You know, I'm in. It's yours.
And then she shows up here.
And then she showed up for the premiere. It was like,
I know. Meanwhile, I'm at the West of Memphis premiere party talking to Damien, which was just unbelievably mind-blowing, about his PTSD in prison.
Right. Sure.
And that was what we were talking about. And somebody comes up and says, "Are you going to go to that Mary J. Blige concert?" And I said, "No, it's at Harry O's or something," thinking it was just one of those random concerts. And then Kirby's after party. Like Kirby's after party is Mary J. Blige.
and Estelle. I want to give a shout out to Estelle. She was amazing.
And Most Def.
He didn't. He ended up having to cancel last minute.
Okay.
Well, go to our website, www.invisiblewarmovie.com. And there's a ton of information on the site, both about the film and about calls to action that people can take to help stop this epidemic.
Definitely. Let us, and is there anything that you want to say in terms of what people can do?
The most important thing is go to the website and sign the petition and get 10 people to sign that petition. The more numbers we are, the more powerful we are, the more the DOD will know this is on the radar, it can't be a secret, and something has to be done.
Okay.
Great.
Let's go out and make history together.
Let's do it.
Thank you both so much for making this film.
Thank you. Thank you for responding to it, and really appreciate it.
Great.
It's a great film. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Bye, Kirby.
Bye.
When you report something, you better be prepared for the repercussions.
If a man gets accused of rape, it's a setup. The woman's lying.
I could choose to report it, but if they found that what I was saying wasn't to be truthful, then that I would be reduced in rank.
You could lose your rate, you could lose rank, you could lose your school if you file a false report. So do you want to file a report?
Even with the rape kit and everything, and my friend catching him rape me, they still don't believe me.
I reported it 2 different times to my squad leader. And he told me that there was nothing he can do about it because I didn't have any proof.
They actually did charge me with adultery. I wasn't married, he was.
They took me before my lieutenant commander. He says, "Do you think this is funny?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Is this all a joke to you?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You're the 3rd girl to report rape this week. Are you guys like all in cahoots? Do you think this is a game?"
So we are here with Nani de la Pena, who is a journalist, a filmmaker, and now a pioneer of virtual reality news making.
I call it immersive journalism. And the idea is, how do we do news and nonfiction in 3D virtual spaces? How do we make news experiential and spatial, where you walk around the news story?
So tell me, if I was going to go and make a film, would everybody have to watch it with that on? And where do you see this all going?
Well, the technology is moving very, very quickly. So on one hand, we had to use a lot of motion capture to recreate the actions of our virtual humans, right, who were donated to me, which is amazing.
Donated virtual humans.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
So in order to build a virtual environment and you want it to be populated with people, who makes those people? It takes some artists, the construction, et cetera. It takes work to do that. And I built this thing on a very low budget, so if that's any inspiration, literally $500 my own money, and then donations from the motion capture studio, Phase Space, from my lead programmer, Bradley Newman. John Brennan is an artist and animator who helped make sure that John not only played every character, that we motion captured so that the movements were natural and real. In the future, we're working on an iPhone piece right now, and in the future you'll be able to just use our iPhone app, and it has a gyro locator, so you'll be able to move around like this without having to have all of our fancy motion capture equipment. But for films, this is not an expensive budget to do this, and so if you want to create your story and motion capture it first and make sure it feels right, it'll save you a lot more money than trying to shoot it with an actor and having it spend all the money in the real shoot day. So
I see. Okay, and then eventually, instead of handing out 3D glasses, we can hand out iPhones or tell people to bring their iPhone, and then they can watch the movie that way.
That's right. That's right. Or they can and it's interesting in this sort of space. If we wanted to, we could put triggers on people so that when you see that virtual human and you walk up to them, you could actually touch a person. So all the people in the room would be captured as well, and you could make it so that the feeling becomes very physical and real, because literally you'd be the virtual human and I'd walk up and there you would be. And so there's a lot of really interesting ways and directions you can do this. But my main concern has been the news. How do we tell news stories that are important and meaningful using these gaming platforms?
Because you want people to actually care, instead of going, oh, look at those people in that line. I just had that contraption on my head. And what I saw were hungry people in a line in Los Angeles, or on any street, it seemed. And they were waiting in line when one man falls down and he goes into a seizure. And then the ambulance comes and the paramedics come, and there's a strange interaction with the paramedics, actually. Somebody's yelling, is there a doctor? And the audio is something you captured real live, as if you were there with radio, right?
Yeah, we used this scene, we wanted to do something about how invisible people are. There's a lot of hungry people in America now, and they're very invisible. So how do you report on this important story that's just a statistic, it's just a number? So we captured a lot of audio at food banks, and till we captured what we thought was something that was emotional and evocative and was appropriate, and we did good journalism. Good feature journalism where you get a lot of hours, and we cut this piece down so that everything that unfolds in our piece, you would have been a witness had you been there on the street with them. And we put you life-size, with these life-size virtual people, but the whole scene, it immerses you as if you're actually on the street.
So are you having a wonderful time here, or is it freaking you out? I mean, how many people have come through this room? It seems like there's a line out the door. Are you here just 24/7 watching people see this man fall down, every single person? It must be. I was thinking of you when I had the headset on. I was thinking as I look down, you're like, oh, she's at that part, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's been a little bit strange for me, because I knew I was telling this strong news story, but we've had people come out of the head-mounted display crying and in tears, and suddenly you're their therapist. I'm just the journalist, but all of a sudden I realize I have this responsibility to people, that if I'm going to put them through that, I have to consider what the impact of what I've done is, and so that's been really interesting for me as in terms of how we constructed this narrative. And I wanted it to be strong, but I had no idea that it would be quite so evocative.
What's next? What news story are you going to do next?
Well, this is when I've kind of been putting the message out that if somebody's got the audio piece captured of some really cool story, I'd love to have some partnerships and start working with people.
I know somebody you should talk to.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, Jennifer Sharp. She goes around, does all this brilliant verite capturing of audio for NPR generally, but she's free spirit in Santa Monica. So if you're in LA, she's fantastic. You'll love her. I will.
Do you want to let the audience know how to reach you? Do you have a website?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about what it means to have an immersive experience in the news, I call it immersive journalism. So you can just go to immersivejournalism.com. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, and good luck.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right,
bye.
we'll see you later.
We like to believe that the drug war has given law enforcement all these tools, all of this authority in which to pursue criminality and gangsterism. But actually what it did was it basically destroyed the police deterrent in a very subtle and unintended way.
Going up to 15th Street in Dixie, he's gonna have some crack for him and some oxycodone pills. Joe and I are both sergeants in major narcotics, and we don't do street-level drug deals. Okay, deal is good, guys. Start thinking about why you're in handcuffs, and maybe you can help yourself out, okay? So what happened is to the second guy, he's now running on foot. Yeah, that's where we believe he might have gone in there. I guess we're gonna have to write this up as a separate case. Totally unrelated to the original drug deal we did, but we stumble upon a house where a couple of big stacks of money, a good amount of marijuana. That's sometimes how things happen, you know, they're not even planned.
There are a lot of detectives who I admire for their professionalism, for their craft.
Hey, what's up? Can I help you? No, sir.
But the drug war created an environment in which none of that was rewarded.
Just get his ID, he's just cutting through the yard.
A drug arrest does not require anything other than getting out of your radio car and jacking people up against the side of a liquor store. Probable cause? Are you kidding? The problem is that that cop that made that cheap drug arrest, he's going to get paid. He's going to get the hours of overtime for taking the drugs down to ECU. He's going to get paid for processing the prisoner down at Central Booking. He's going to get paid for sitting back at his desk and writing the paperwork for a couple hours. And he's going to do that 40, 50, 60 times a month so that his base pay might end up being only half of what he's actually paid as a police officer.
Most important thing right here.
We're paying a guy for stats.
All right, so we have here Sundance Grand Jury Prize-winning director Eugene Jarecki, who won here for Why We Fight in 2006, I want to say? 2005. Yep. Oh. And also you made Reagan, which was here last year, yeah, which I also saw, and I thought it was really elucidating in many ways, and maddening in many ways. And now you're back with The House I Live In, which everybody calls The House We Live In.
Yes, which is
and David Kirby started that rumor.
Yeah, I mean, you know, The House I Live In is a movie about very much the world I live in America, which is a world in which the drug war has had a huge impact on many people I know and on millions of Americans whose lives have been decimated by it. So very often people accidentally say the house we live in, and I don't correct them because we all do live in that world until further notice.
It's amazing how educational your film is and what a light it shines on the drug war. I don't think we ever get that perspective on our media about how destructive the drug war is on everyday lives and how perverse the sentencing laws are.
And how rooted in racism drug laws are.
Yeah.
And have been historically.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Just for our audience, I want to say your film shows that opium was outlawed as a response to Chinese and California achieving economic success, and then cocaine started being outlawed as a result of fear that whites had about black advantage that cocaine might have given them. And then marijuana became outlawed as a result of Mexican immigrant farm workers.
I mean, we have chapter by chapter in our history used drug laws for racist purposes that usually had to do with perceiving a given group, usually an immigrant group, as a threat to the status quo, a threat to the economic order. What we've seen in the modern era, why black people, for example, in the last 30 years, and now increasingly just poor people have been targeted, is that in 1971, what had been a haphazard group of drug laws that did have a history of racism, they became codified into a war. Richard Nixon in 1971 declared a war on drugs. And what comes with a war, of course, is all the things that come with all wars. And the drug war is our longest war. It's 40 years now. We've spent $1 trillion, all this grotesque waste, a tragedy for so many people. But the worst of it is that it's very unstoppable. And the reason it's unstoppable is the same reason wars become unstoppable, which is that out of them come these systems of power, these industries, large and small, that rely upon the continuation of the war. So I went to 25 states and I visited with people all across what you could call the sort of prison industrial complex in America. People who work in the prisons themselves, but not just them. People who work in, providing food service to a prison, or phone service, or coming to fix what's broken, or providing laundry service. And these people all have rather normal jobs and lives. They don't go home at night thinking, I'm part of something terribly evil that hurts my fellow man. They think, probably, I'm making a meal and I'm going to try to make it better than the other person does. I'll steam the carrots better that the person's going to eat so they're not crunchy and raw and hard to digest. I'll think about the person I'm cooking for. I met a lot of people like that who had a real feeling for their job and trying to make the most of it. It's all happening within a system that is grotesquely immoral, that feeds upon, now increasingly simply, poor people among us and their own addiction or their own struggle or their own being locked out of the mainstream economy and scrambling to find a way to make a living. And that's what's so tragic, is it's like a war and that you can't stop
And
it.
it's also the fastest growing industry. Yeah. I mean, it has been for years. Because anytime a town is flagging, you just put up a prison.
Sure. And it has a huge impact. There's a fellow in the film named Mike Carpenter, who's the security chief. He's effectively the warden of a prison in Oklahoma, and he's as tough as nails. And so when you talk to him from a distance, I was actually kind of frightened to talk to him. My producers, one of the producers on the film, said she thought it was going to be very interesting. I said, that guy looks like a caricature of a hardened prison guard. I want to talk to him like I want a hole in the head. And we sat down to talk together, and he's an astonishingly deep well of a man who looks at what he's doing and actually compares it to countries like situations like Nazi Germany, compares it to the way in which an industrial sector can come to rely upon a system of incarceration. We have mass incarceration. It's an industry in America. It's an industry, I would say, to which we are addicted. I mean, the funny thing is that the addiction of drugs is a tiny, tiny issue compared to the way in which we have become addicted as a nation to the system of war against drugs. I mean, that would be much harder to break. In fact, you can actually work with someone who has an addiction to find their way to, as many people do, out of their addiction to a better place.
This is a many-headed monster.
This is a thing that is very hard to stop. I believe it will be stopped, and I believe it can be. And
you provide solutions.
Well, I also am invested in the people I've seen who are working every day to slow it down, and they are making some progress, largely because the war on drugs has demonstrated itself to be morally and economically bankrupt. We've spent over $1 trillion in 40 years, 45 million arrests. We are the world's largest jailer, 2.3 million people behind bars. That's more people in absolute numbers than China has behind bars, let alone the fact that they have a population so much larger than ours. So proportionately, it's ridiculous. We are a far greater incarcerator. And to what end?
And your movie really makes clear sort of the effect that the war has in communities where police are incentivized to make very I'd say, cheap arrests in order to pad their stats, in order to get overtime.
Perfectly.
And so those police officers are then rewarded with promotions. And then when you have a serious officer who does a long-term investigation, he makes one arrest in a month, and he's disincentivized to do that type of investigation.
Yeah, and it's, that argument in the film is provided by the wonderful and inestimable David Simon, the creator of The Wire, who, had I not bumped into, I would know far less than I do about the drug war, because so much of the film is influenced by the way David Simon has come to understand incarceration, police work.
He's an incredible resource in the
He's
film.
incredible. And one of the things he really shared with me is the way in which the drug war has undermined public safety. Because while that's happening, when a cop is driving around basically preying on petty crime around the streets, and putting people away ultimately for nonviolent activity, for longer sentences than violent activities get, which is so perverse you can't even get your head around it, that cop is at that moment missing out on solving something that we would consider a true public threat, something we thought of as the sort of province of police work.
Right.
It's not just a moral thing. We can feel terrible that people are being put away. I have a gentleman in the film who's in jail for life without parole for the possession of 3 ounces of methamphetamine.
And that was a very interesting point in the film where it said if you have 2 prior convictions and then you have an intent to distribute, it's life without parole.
Yep, and by the way, it's even worse than that. You don't even need all that language about intent to distribute. You need to be found, as he was, in a trailer park with any amount of meth in the facility. It doesn't even have to be on your person. There doesn't have to be really any intent to distribute. That's called a conspiracy charge. And conspiracy is construable very loosely by prosecutors. And there's a judge, several judges in the film, who talk about the excess of power that prosecutors have in the courtroom as a result of tough-on-crime, draconian drug laws that ultimately make it so that that guy we're talking about, he's in jail for life without parole for the possession of a substance that he was taking in his own body, not hurting anyone, no violence. The guy in the cell next to him, who's in for murder, will be out.
Right.
And it makes no sense. But you guys, I want to bring it back because I know you have to go very shortly, and we're going to have you into the studio for a whole and we'll talk more. But I want to bring it back to the filmmaking process because you do make such extraordinary films. And you, in this film, you talk about striking a balance, and really you come from a very personal perspective also. So I want to make sure we do discuss that.
Sure.
And how you did that. And you use your nanny, and then you had to edit together, sort of taking us on an emotional journey.
Sure.
And then all this intellectual stuff that you guys have just blown me
Absolutely.
away with.
I mean, one of the main characters in the film is a woman that I've known my whole life. She was a housekeeper for my family. She actually wasn't a nanny. Her name is Nanny. It's something that goes on in the film. She was just born. That's her birth name, Nanny. But my mom always told us that Nanny was not a nanny. She was a housekeeper, and we should clean up our room and make sure she didn't have to pick up anything off the floor. And when I grew up, I gained a lot of wisdom from Nanny. Nanny was somebody who taught me a huge amount. I always called her Mrs. Jetter. In the film, she's called Nanny because she's a character and wouldn't make sense to call her Mrs. Jetter, but I always called her Mrs. Jetter. I still do. And Mrs. Jetter taught me a great deal about life, about struggle, about her own struggle as an African American. And I knew her and I knew her children very well. We all grew up in this kind of it was New Haven, Connecticut. The civil rights movement was ending. I was growing up at a time where it looked like a lot was going to get better for black people. And so I kind of thought of myself like just one of a kind with all these folks who were African American. And as I grew older and I turned into this sort of privileged, pudgy, white suburban kid, and I watched these guys falling off the map, crashing into very limited opportunity, very poor education systems, civic programs that were absolutely being scuttled right and left. What happened to the civil rights movement was the question. What had happened to those gains that we all hoped for and were relying upon? And I watched that happen, and it stayed with me. It stayed with me for a long time, and as I got more thoughtful, I tried to understand from her, what did she think was going wrong for the generation after her? She was the first generation of black Americans who could simply say, I am the last generation that is going to be worse off than my kids. Basically, her next generation was worse off than her. There had been a steady climb since slavery. And all of a sudden, the generation after Nanny Jetter is slipping. And why? And ultimately, she thought it was about drugs. She thought the introduction of drugs into the inner city and how that happened is its own dark story. But she thought the introduction of drugs had eroded the lives of her children and grandchildren. And I started with that. And I wanted to understand, well, how did that happen? Why didn't that happen to white people who I understand use drugs the same as black people? I mean, it's one of the great myths. We all think of crack, for example, as a black drug. I always thought it was a black drug. That's what I was told by Reagan, by everybody else growing up. Well,
so
it turns out.
Fighter.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at 13% of America is black, and as it turns out, 13% of crack users are black. Black people use crack the same as white people, which actually means that white people are the majority crack users in America, something you would never imagine. And so I was wondering, well, what's happened? Why isn't white America being affected? Well, it turns out they are. And then I started to ask people like David Simon, well, what is this about drugs? Why did drugs do this to the black community? And he looked at me sort of pityingly and said, well, the drugs are one thing, but it's the drug war that's been the major problem. The drug war has turned the manageable and understandable public health problem that drugs may represent and turned it into a criminal justice nightmare that has turned us into this kind of gulag system of a country with an industrial sector that relies upon basically the cannibalism of our own people to sustain itself. And then I started down a road to research what that war on drugs was and what the shape of it was more broadly.
Right. Yeah, I want to compliment your cinematography in the film as well. Thinking, because we're talking about prison, of the scene. You know, it's white and it's like the guy's face in the door.
Yeah.
It's so memorable.
Yeah,
so
that was an amazing
will
moment.
Hang with everybody, I think.
Yeah.
So
You
congratulations.
can see my cinematographer trembling as he's filming the guy because the
Who
intensity.
is he, your cinematographer?
That was Sam Coleman and Derek Hallquist, both shooting on that day.
And how long did you shoot for?
You know, I've been making this thing. I mean, I started making this thing in my heart 40 years ago, right? I started making it as a movie and research and thinking how to do it 10 years ago. And we started shooting, the first things we shot were a prison industrial trade show in Florida. That was a real baptism by fire.
By the way, wow. I think we showed that on...
We did. We showed that on our
live,
episode.
Didn't we?
I think you may have.
Oh my God, it was mind-blowing. At first I'm like, what is this? And then
you can't believe you're there. I mean, they're selling you like they were selling plumbing hardware, or shower curtain rings. Stun guns and chairs where you can restrain people. And I went to one booth, I said, what do you guys do? And they said, oh, we sell legal services to prisons. Oh,
that seems reasonable.
What kind of legal services? Oh, we sell them legal services that help them block the efforts of their inmates to appeal. Let me translate that. We sell them the skills to block the due process of their inmates. This is a booth right next to a guy selling sandwiches. And you think, okay, this has become grotesque. It's become a perverse departure from anything we would think of as decency, as American standardized norms that relate to running a country about human dignity. And it's gone so far, you say, well, why would it continue? And it continues because it does represent such an array of vested interests that need to be shifted. I mean, one of the fears that would come from my kind of thinking is, well, what about all these people and their jobs? So you'll get rid of all these people. No, let's shift them to an industry that actually makes a product
maybe we can
sell.
Make stuff back in America again.
Yeah, that would be made here and sold to a foreign country. Like, you remember when Obama talked about those green jobs? Yeah. Take all these people because there's a lot of smart people, a lot of talented people working across the prison industrial system, change the laws so there's less of a flood of bodies, and move all those people into a product people can buy. Nobody overseas can buy the product of the prison industry. They can't buy the misery of our prisoners. They can't buy their broken families. They can't buy their recidivism and their unending addiction. It's not a product.
Eugene. Yeah. I've never suggested this before, but I think that you should just take a slight sabbatical now that you've made so many films and go into politics.
Well, I will be living this subject for a very long time.
I think you need to. Good. I think you should really. I mean, you're so effective when you talk about it.
You spend any time with the people,
and it's hard not to after seeing your movie.
Man, you spend any time. The people in my movie, every single one of them. I'd be talking to someone. I'd be thinking, this is really dark information. This is really heartbreaking. But look at this lady. Her kid is in for life without parole, and she's not given up. She's like 30 years older than I am, and she's like indefatigable. She, got my ear and talked it off and made sure I put her in the movie. And the passion of that, or the passion of a security guard like Carpenter, who's standing in his prison uniform, talking to me about the darkness of what they're doing wrong and how he wants to do it better, but the laws that tough on crime politicians pass pervert the system. What a wonderful thing. And you get a federal judge in my movie who speaks out against the mandatory minimums that put black people away.
Is this why you make films? I mean, your films are so intensely informative, political, and I mean, were you at first, early on in life, were you a political science? Where were your interests?
I'm a people person. I love talking to people on airplanes. I'll talk to. Remember the scene in Airplane where he keeps talking to the.
I actually just showed it to my son the other day.
He keeps talking to people and they want to shoot themselves. I talk to everyone.
Guy.
Yes.
Actually, can you pass over later? No,
it's that. I talk to people until they don't want to hear me anymore because there's a lot of things I care about, but I mostly like to absorb from people what they are passionate about. And you talk to people who work in that system, and it is almost, I was in 25 states. I could barely find someone who would speak in the defense of this system. What I did find is a lot of silence, and you have to understand, this is a war. It's America's longest war. And as America's longest war, it has the same quality that other wars have, which is if you are not protesting it, you are de facto supporting it. Because wars run on the assumption that silence is affirmative. Nixon, when he was running the Vietnam War and there were protesters out in the street, he'd say, yeah, those hippies can protest all they want. But I have an index card here telling me that 55% of Americans basically support this. Right. So they can make all the noise they want to. It's irrelevant to me. So the tacit approval that lies in silence is destructive to so many lives in this country right now. And I think if Americans actually know what's happening, if you see the 400 richest Americans today have more money than the bottom 130 million. That's a class gap that has never been achieved in human history, not by the Roman Empire. Americans figured that out. When they figured it out, they went out in the street. If Americans understand, and that's how Occupy stands for something for us, if Americans now come to understand, as even Ron Paul does, that this is a grossly absurd system that is destructive to human life and an inappropriate deployment of American resources and American intellect and American energies. They may say, hey, let's find a different way. And the next time a politician comes and panders with nonsense, tough on crime language, you'll ask him to be smart on crime. I mean, it's like if you have a weed in your yard and someone comes to you and says, I will cut down that weed, and they hack it off and they go home, you're going to think, this is a fraud. That weed, we all know, will not only sprout back up, but usually when you hack a weed, it gets the message you want to kill it, so it starts to spread out. Well, I want somebody who's going to come and dig up that weed. I want to know what you're going to do to stop the drug abuse and the drug illegal activity that happens because people are poor, because they are despairing, because they don't have other kinds of job availability. I mean, those are real things that until somebody deals with, they're lying.
I've one last question. How did you get the access? I mean, you went riding with the drug dealer, you went riding with the police in Baltimore, you
He's
were in the
Eugene
prison
Jarecki.
systems. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's not why.
I'm just kidding.
That would hurt matters.
I was kidding.
Yeah, no, but I understand what you mean. Persistence and energy and earnestness, and you know, when I get a no, and people on my producing staff are trying to get in somewhere, I call and I bang down doors and I go see people on the lark that they may not talk to me, and I run the risk that I've brought my cameras and I brought anything and they're going to turn me away, and I care about public.
Answer,
I care about people, and they can tell I care about people. I'm not there to ambush them. I'm not there to make them into a particular. I want to know what the universal is.
Well, that's the defining theme of what you've said, is that there's all these people stuck inside this system, whether they're behind the bars or they're the people that are employed by the system. Right. And that's the problem, is breaking down the system, and how do we work together to break that down. And good luck to you, and I can't wait to see eyes open around this country and the world as you push this out. Where are we going to be able to keep up with it?
Yeah. Well, we don't know yet. That's what we're here trying to find, is who's going to distribute the film, and that's what being at Sundance is.
Well, Sundance is a helpful place to go for that
great
kind
start.
of thing.
Yeah, we do have a website. It's thehouseilivin.org. And the best thing about the website now is that you can see some clips from the film and some of the stuff, information about what we're doing, but what it has is a link called Get Involved. And that has 20 or so of the organizations that we've come into contact with who are fighting different ramparts of this battle. Families Against Mandatory Minimums is a wonderful organization in this country that has really put a spotlight on what mandatory minimum sentences do. What they do is they say, whatever amount of drugs you have on you, there's a schedule. If you have 5 grams of this, you get such and such a sentence. And the only person completely left out of the equation is the judge. The judge, who we think is the arbiter of justice, the judge just stands there and rubber stamps something that Congress, a completely corrupt body, invented. So Families Against Mandatory Minimums wants your support, and they can go a long way, and they've made real strides in reducing mandatory minimums that have otherwise been there, and in shining a light on the need for their reform. And they're just one organization of many that people can go to on the site and use us really as a pass-through to get to people doing real things.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Good luck with the rest of Sundance.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
It's exciting. We're very happy to be here.
Congratulations.
Thank you guys very much.
Great to finally meet you.
Yes, same here,
Eugene.
Andy.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
We're here in the Bible Belt, you know, law and order Oklahoma. The prison is the largest employer in the county, and if you take out a prison, the towns would just dry up.
I don't know that there's a job I could do better in the whole world. I guess they should have wrote prison guard on my forehead when I was born, because it just fits me. The job was built for me.
You know, we incarcerate women at the highest per capita rate in the nation. Males, we incarcerate, I believe, the 3rd highest rate. We have 1,500 inmates. Majority of our, drug or drug-related crimes.
Zones 10, 38,
If we got 50 in today, 50 must leave because we're full.
We have a nice, secure facility. I can keep anybody you want to keep, and I can keep them for as long as you want to keep them. The facility itself is as secure as it can get.
Lift the genitals up. Turn around, stretch your butt. Spread it with your hands.
I'm doing a life sentence for 2nd-degree murder. I killed a guy behind a bad drug deal in Oklahoma City.
Never been high on a piece of dope in my entire life, but I've sold tons of it, unfortunately.
I've always said that all of us have done something in our lives that if we had been caught, we could have just as easily been in prison.
Correct. Here you recognize that your chances to manipulate the system are done. That door slams behind you and you have absolutely no ability to control what goes on the other side of that door. This is where most people, if they're a newcomer, a first-time offender, where they really figure out that this is prison. And this is what the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of your life looks like. This is it.
So I guess you asked the question, what's the solution? It's complex, obviously, but one of the things that needs to be noticed or known by the public is that the vast majority of people who use drugs do so without a problem, and they work and so forth. And so drugs are not the enemy in that regard. We have to think about what happened with marijuana. Marijuana almost became normalized in our society, but previously it was vilified. And so when we have these new drugs like methamphetamine comes along, and people say these incredible things about drugs, you just need to be more critical and more skeptical, because that's just simply not true. Drugs just don't have that kind of power. Although we know that sometimes people who are engaged in that type of activity can get into trouble and have various problems. And it can be drug related or not drug related. But in general, drugs can't do all the things that we claim that they do. And this comes from someone who gives these drugs to people and study them under a wide range of conditions.
Well, I wanted to thank Eugene for bringing this to the public attention, because I don't think a lot of people understand the effect of mandatory minimums. And so, you know, there's this huge fanfare about now it's only 18-to-1. I've actually rejected the 18-to-1 and stuck with my 1-to-1. But the problem is the mandatory minimums, and they're just, you know, they're politically driven, they make no sense, and we're incarcerating generations of young people for these ungodly sentences, 20, 30 years. I'm the most reversed judge in our circuit of the 60 or so federal district court judges on sentencing issues. I've got a rap as being a lenient sentencer. My average sentence last year in the drug case was 17 and a half years. There's nothing lenient about that. There's nothing lenient about that. And I just want to end with, you know, I really bristle when I hear the phrase temper justice with mercy. Justice should include mercy, and mercy and justice are totally inconsistent with mandatory minimums.
I just want to ask the judge a quick question. I think this goes to, I think that's the question, what do we do? Do you talk to your colleagues about your knowledge? Because I think that's what many of us need to do in terms of what we do in terms of our own drug use and all the rest of those things. Talk to people who look like you, because me talking to white folks is not as compelling as you white folks talking to white folks. And me talking to judges is not as compelling as you talking to judges.
Well, you know, we have some ethical restraints. You know, I can't remake things like Eugene does, and so I'm kind of cautious in being preachy towards my colleagues, but one of the...
Not preachy, educational.
Yeah, well, I educate them because they read my opinions, particularly in sentencing, and a lot of judges around the country have started to follow. It just takes one judge to have the courage to say 100-to-1 is ridiculous, and I'm not bound by that because I have new discretion from the Supreme Court. I'm going to exercise that discretion, disagree with the Sentencing Commission, disagree with the 100-to-1, disagree with the 18-to-1, and go to 1-to-1. So you do it incrementally. One thing that I have done that I have proselytized is I visit inmates in prison, and you saw a little bit of a clip of that. And I have encouraged my federal district court judge colleagues to do that, because I think it makes you a much more compassionate and understanding judge when you sit face to face with somebody that you've given maybe a life sentence to, which I've done that. And it's very inspiring because you see the possibility of people and their ability to change. You know, Gandhi said, the greatness of humankind is not that we can remake the world, but that we can remake ourselves. And so when you go into a prison and you see people doing really positive things about their life, that's great. It just shows you how ridiculous the mandatory minimums are.
Unfortunately, we have to kind of wrap things up, but I do want, Eugene, if you have any final words about what they can do to sort of, you know, get this.
You know who I want to give that to is Betty. Betty, come join me. Maybe you and Dennis both can talk about you.
my thoughts on the entire thing from my experience with Kevin, of course, is to do away with mandatory minimums. They absolutely make no sense at all. And the cost to my state is my granddaughter's education in the public school system. We have no money for that kind of thing. We have no money for the health care, the mental institutions. It's all being spent on our offenders, all of those people that are locked up in the correction system. And I feel as if it's very politically motivated. My son was sentenced to life without parole because a district attorney was running for senator. He won on my son's back, I feel. So need to do away with mandatory minimums.
What I'm going to speak about a little bit is about family and how drugs can affect your family and how maybe that some can be put in place that me, myself, don't have to go down that path again. I lost 2 kids to it. My addiction, where someone could have stepped in a long time instead of putting me in prison, saying, hey, can we help this man? But nothing was in place for that. So I'm dealing with one son that's passed away, and I'm dealing with another one that I may not can get back in my life. All because, am I a bad person? Not today. I wasn't a bad person 20 years ago, but society said I was. So today I changed on my own. I could have changed 20 years ago with a little help and understanding from society instead of saying I'm just a bad man and throw the key away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Eugene, and to the entire cast from the film. Thank you so much.
So Vlad, when was the last time you and I were at Sundance? I mean, it feels like a totally different experience, but like we're back at home again.
Yeah, well, that was 2009 with We Live in Public, and now we're back here on the other side of the camera.
I love being on the other side of the camera.
So do I. We've seen a lot of great artists, art installations, a lot of great films, and talked to a lot of great filmmakers.
Yeah, special shout out actually to Shari Freelo at New Frontiers for hosting BYOD this year. It's been so exciting to see the new ways that documentary is being filmed, is being portrayed, and some of the other art there. Highly recommend New Frontiers. And we've had some great interviews so far with filmmakers, and just feel like constantly educated and bombarded by the passion and excitement that we feel at Sundance 2012. So we got lots more coming your way.
That's right, so stay tuned for our next episode.
All right. Woo, those are some heavy, heavy documentaries.
Yeah.
Taking on the military.
And the war on drugs.
Yeah, and our prison system.
That's right.
Wow, those guys are serious. Kirby's amazing, and we're gonna have him in for a whole profile show coming up soon. And Amy, she did such incredible interviews. She got those women to open up, and men.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's wild. And next episode, we will have 5 Broken Cameras directors, 1 Palestinian, 1 Israeli. Incredible team, incredible film. Highly recommend you tune in for our next BYOD. Also, my friend Lucy Walker.
At Tsunami and the Cherry Blossom.
Yep, who's been nominated for an Oscar for this short film. We'll talk about that film and about Sundance in general. And then the other Dream Team, which brings narrative or scripted or pre-scripted actor filmmakers into the doc world for the first time to talk about just how brutal documentary filmmaking is. And they're running back to pre-scripted actor films after that experience. So that's next episode.
That's right, so stay tuned.
More fun at Sundance.